Lord has made, let us rejoice and be glad in it. Whakatap ki he otua mawhi o ki he tau lotolotonga. Tapat ki he tahine ko Federica Lupe Uluiva whatawhehe o la paha tuita. Tapat ki he whakaawe whalanglangi o e aho. Honourable Tatafu Moeaki, Minister of Trade, Economic and Development. Tapat ki he Ambassador of the People's Republic of China to Tonga, Xiao Lin. Tapat ki Australian High Commissioner Designate, Rachel Moore. Tapat ki New Zealand High Commission First Secretary, Ryan Brown. Papehefo Tatafu ki hea whaiwhekau sela la dai la kepa mo ha alotu. Distinguished guests, President and members of the Media Association of Tonga, like the Niua Whaoan say, malo te koutou lele. Please allow me to commence with the program, as I know that everybody has a very busy schedule for this morning, or the rest of this afternoon. So let me invite the Reverend Sela Latai Lakepa to commence our program with an opening prayer. Malo.
Malo o whakole peke o whamalmalo he ngai whakatapu kotoa pē kua whaki, kai whai hatau lotu, te au tomu alau peki I konga me wholofola, ki toko no pe whahatau lotu. The Honourable Minister, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, it's a pleasure for me to lead the opening prayer, and I will read a portion from the 1 Kings, chapter 6, verses 11 to 13, and the word says, "The word of the Lord came to Solomon, as for this temple you are building, you will follow my decrees, observe my laws and keep all my commands and obey them. I will fulfill you through the promise I gave to David your father, and I will live among the Israelites and will not abandon my people Israel." So for many years, the Ark of the Covenant had no building to shelter on. During King David's time, the Ark was settled on Mount Moriah. And King David wanted to build a temple, but God said, "No, your hands are bloodied, so you will not build a temple. Your son, King Solomon, has been chosen to build God's temple." So King Solomon built God's temple. The purpose of that was to house the Ark of the Covenant of God and to provide a place for the assembly and worship of God's people. It wasn't to be just any temple. It was built with the best materials in the land. The strong and durable cedars of Lebanon, the pure gold lining that lined the inner sanctuaries, and the cherubims. And then there was olive wood, symbolizing peace, and juniper, symbolizing music and praise. Those were used to frame the doors and to make the doors of the temple. It was a beautiful temple with a divine purpose. And then there followed a faithful promise. "If you follow my decrees and observe my laws and keep all my commands and obey me, I will fulfill through you the promise I gave to David your father, and I will live among the Israelites and will not abandon my people." So God's people were dispersed throughout the land, and the obedient and faithful construction of the temple by Solomon held a promise of unity, protection, and everlasting love, a promise of everlasting fellowship of God's people. And so Solomon responded to his father's plans and God's command and the misplacement of God's people with an act of faith, the best for God in accordance to his commands. What happened? Solomon's wisdom has remained unmatched, and the people of Israel worshipped freely during his time. The onset of Covid-19 across the world has pushed nations, governments, disciplines, organizations to the very edges of their own frontiers. Peoples, families, communities are expecting experts to come up with solutions to formed and unformed questions. It is a challenging time for everyone across the globe. The urgency gives us no choice but to simultaneously try to understand and solve the situation as we go. But in the rush and in the bewilderment, we must spare a moment of silence and let God speak to us today. You have been chosen to build a temple. This temple is for the sanctuary of the people of God, and you will use nothing but the best of your intellect, the best of your love, the best of your heart, the best of your thoughts, the best of your analysis, the best of your contemplations, the best of your interpretations. You will respond to this crisis in accordance to God's plans and God's commands, and with faith in the Lord God Almighty. And as for this temple that you this morning are building, you will follow God's decrees, observe God's laws, and keep all God's commands and obey them. And then God will fulfill through you and your deliberations the promise that he gave to your fathers. And then the people of God will live, and God will not abandon them. May God's word be our guide as we commence the deliberations of today. Let us pray. Heavenly Father, let your word be our guide today as we try to understand our current situation and find ways into the future. Let us not seek understanding based on the intelligence of our minds, but also on the faith and love in our hearts. And let that faith and love be a faith in Jesus Christ and a love in an everlasting Father. And whilst we may have a dire outlook on our economic situation, we have complete trust in you, that you will reveal to us a solid structure that we can build as a response to this situation. And in our hearts, may we seek to react with obedience and faith, and await fearlessly with complete hope in you as we proceed to build a temple of refuge for your people. Be with us now and forever, and may glory be yours everlasting. In Jesus' loving name we pray. Amen.
Whakamalo atu kia whaiwhekao sela la tai la kepa, and thank you for boldly linking the connection between leadership, wisdom, COVID-19, and of course today's topic, assessing Tonga's economic outlook during this COVID-19 era. Just before I invite the representative of PACMAS to deliver the welcome address to you all, I was asked to just briefly give a summary of the difference between a press conference and a press club. Today you are here at the Tonga's very first press club, with much appreciation to the Australian government for helping us set this up. There's a bit of hesitation and I guess a lot of anxiety when we invite people to come and speak at the press club, because many assume it's like a press conference where there's a specific topic with new information and journalists get to drill the people who are presenting the new information. Whereas a press club is very similar to our Tongan concept of whawholai whalaka whaihatalanga. And that's exactly what we're here to do today. We're rolling out the mat and we've got our distinguished speaker here today with us, the Honourable Minister, to talk about this very topic, and this is an opportunity for us to just have a tālanga. Talk about it, know more about it, and share the information that you may have as well with the Minister, as well as he with you. So please do enjoy today's deliberations. It's not to put anybody on the spot, it's for us to learn more. Learn more and gather more information about the topic that has been presented today. So without further ado, I would like to welcome Taina Kami Enoka, the Pacific Media Assistance Scheme, PACMAS Liaison Officer for Tonga, to deliver the welcome. Malom, Taina.
Kore mo ke whamamalu I he ngahi tala whakatapu, ko se on hao whaki, ka ata ke whin mo tuani, ke whafofonga I ai kautaha tokoni, ke mitia I he Pasifiki, ai o kiloa ko PACMAS. Ai ko whatongia o ko ke whai ko lea taitari. Pea ko kore atu pe ke o ngau ea ke lea whaka Britania o I ko kau whafofonga mimuri o knau hen. Honourable Frederica Tuita, guest speaker, Honourable Minister of Trade and Economic Development, Tatafu Moeaki, Ambassador of the People's Republic of China, Zhao Lin, the Australian High Com designate, Rachel Moore, the New Zealand High Com, Ryan Brown, second New Zealand High Commissioner, and Governor of the National Reserve Bank, Ngongo Kioa, President of the Media Association, Ramalau Valab, ladies and gentlemen. Today, on behalf of the Pacific Media Assistance Scheme, we would like to welcome you to our first Press Club event of 2021. Last year, we launched the Press Club in July with the topic of domestic violence, drugs, and the crime rate during COVID-19. The second presentation was by the Lord Speaker, who spoke about the Constitution Amendment. This year, we are privileged to have the Minister of Trade and Development, Tatafu Moeaki, who will deliver the address on Tonga's economy. Earlier this month, PACMAS funded a workshop for journalists on the national budget and the economy. And for the first time, we were able to deeply appreciate the work put into the national budget, the process, understand the terms and the economic jargon. Without further ado, we look forward to your address and the Q&A that will follow. Malo.
Whamalo atu ki Taina Kami Enoka, the PACMAS Liaison Officer for Tonga. So now we're going to introduce our guest speaker, which is what we're all here for today. But before I do that, can you turn around and say to the person next to you, you look wonderful today? Yes. Even if it's your wife and your husband. Okay. Just to kind of break the ice so you're all getting ready to listen to the address as well as jot down some questions for our conversation. So, our distinguished guest and our keynote speaker today is the Minister for Economic and Development, Trade, Economic and Development in Tonga, Tatafu Moeaki, Honourable Tatafu Moeaki. Moeaki is an experienced development planner and an organisational development expert who believes that people and their ability to work together are critical to the success of your organisation. Organisations that inspires and empower their employees have a competitive advantage, and this is a perspective of the Honourable Minister. A former CEO in government for 7 years and Deputy CEO for 6 years across 4 different ministries. Asia Development Bank Senior Country Officer and World Bank Liaison Officer between the periods of 2016 to 2018, and also continued as Senior Country Officer for ADB Tonga's Pacific Country Office 2018 to 2021. Honourable Moeaki has gained significant experience in organisational and development planning, project, resource management, financial management, budget preparation and reporting. Honourable Moeaki is also the incumbent chair for the Parish Council since 2011 for the Catholic Cathedral of St Mary the Immaculate, seat of Cardinal Mafi, Bishop for the Diocese of Tonga and Niue, and President of the Whasi Mautwhanga Premier Rugby Club. Honourable Moeaki hails from Mautwhanga, married with 4 children, which I'm sure is equally as challenging to parent 4 children, together with his partner, and an educational background with a Masters of Economics from the University of New England, New South Wales, Australia, and a Bachelor of Economics from Victoria, University of Wellington, New Zealand. Let us all give him a warm Tongan clap before he addresses us.
What a brilliant welcome. Once a civil servant, always a civil servant. So it's quite difficult to take in the distinguished, exemplary identified. Tapat me tahine ko whatawhehi o la paha tuita Filipe. Your Excellencies, Ambassador of the People's Republic of China to Tonga, Ambassador Carl Sierling, Your Excellency, the High Commissioner Designate of Australia to Tonga, Rachel Moore, colleagues Ryan, tapmake hatu heni ki he sea pub press club, tapmake he ki he kowana pange pure, takata senengo kio, tapatu ki he Betty Blake, kama ngahi fofongai fae koto pek tau ka whakatahain tuloa tapat Moeaki kai atape ke ha te ki motua koni. I'm quite flexible to English or Tongan, or perhaps I could proceed in English and then I'll be flexible if any questions in Tongan. Firstly, the topic given to me was the outlook on the economy. As you know, the budget is not mine, but under the Minister for Finance. But perhaps I could briefly outline the outlook for Tonga. As you know, pre-COVID, the economic outlook for Tonga was very strong, positive, looking at an average of 3%. In fact, for 2019, Governor of the Reserve Bank, we are looking at about 4%. The latest from the Statistics Department. If you compare that to a decade before, the average growth for Tonga was around 1%. And to increase it to around 4% is a significant, it's quite unheard of in Tonga in the last 20 years. Just to make the difference, it's around 1%, it's around 10 million additional. So 3%, it's around 30 million additional productivity or additional income in the economy in each of those years that would have been not there under the normal circumstances. So for fiscal year 2020, which is end 30 June 20, the projection for Tonga was a 3.5% growth. And as COVID started in March of 2020, there was only one quarter to go, but because of the significant lockdown, there was an anticipated negative 3.5% growth projected. And for fiscal year ending 30 June 2021, there was a projection because of the extended duration of the COVID to be higher at a negative 5.3. If you have seen the budget statement of recent, that has been revised downwards, and the revised downwards reflects the good outcome from government's rapid response to protect our country and to safeguard the entrance of the case to Tonga. As a result, we achieved a positive result. The revised from negative 3.5 to negative 0.8. 0.8. So less than negative 1%. So the economy obviously performed better than expected, and a negative 2.5 from a negative 5.3 for fiscal year ending June of 2021. So although government has done better, matters could have been worse. For example, if there was a case entering the country and then a strict lockdown imposed in the country, no movements of persons, that will mean a lot of businesses will be closed down. And the estimated that we have, the worst case could go to 9% negative or 10%. So that would be approaching a cost to the economy of around 100 million. 100 million will be equivalent to roughly, using our capitation income annually, will be around over 10,000 income that will be lost. This is an estimate. I thought, Madam Chair, because this is the Minister of Finance budget, I'll just hang in there and take on, and perhaps we could afford the opportunity to interact and happy to answer the questions. But I wanted just to quickly touch on the importance of the press club. I recall clearly back in when I was in government as a civil servant, the formation of the freedom of information policy of government. This was around 2011, and I think it was finalized around 2012-13. The minister responsible at the date is the now Minister for Justice, the Honourable Sami Waibul, who was then the Deputy Prime Minister. And this was launched back in 2012 or 13. But I'll be interested to hear from the Madam Chair of the Press Club how that has been useful to the media. But I wanted to raise two significant issues about the importance of freedom of information policy in government. Firstly, the importance of public trust in government, not only by the public but also the key stakeholders, development partners, designated NGOs, women issues, community issues, and stakeholders of equivalent. The other important issue is decisions making or forming public view is highly informed. Kapateu ngagbegi tano fatata ko ni taina. Ai mahuinga ko tau fonua ka pau ko mau tol ko nuge mau fanga mo puna torin. O ku te lota foki ke ako ipe te whanau. Kinawanga rei mo na whakato ki la. Ka koe ngahi mea o tau whepake aha katoa pehe tau whakakaukau, koe rei mo i Covid. O tau fie whai e kau kia koe angelo rei ne tala mai ke te whakakaukau pet, ke tau taofi. O e whai e he tōka ha whaingata. Ka koe angelo Covid, angelo whoki a setane, tene whakai, he te whakakaukau. O, ai e koe, whaua koe mea koe mehe, tō me mehe. Ka e ue sia whakai taha koe. Pa koe, ka pako te ako nake ke te ki re kātalang, ai mahu inga koe ke whanonga mo be ke angelo lelei. Ka o te ke whanong ke angelo a setane o kuhoha mo kotu mea hala. Ke te whakakaukau, e tonu anga no ai ka kai whewhine, ai whakarea. Ka koe, taim ko te whawharea pa haribu e ke mahe ki re kāia, pe ko whe angelo na e mālohi. Ka kutui koe tāri koe ki ai kalafi. Koe angelo koe te ke whawhanga. Koe ia e mālohi. Ai au keha tau whatongia ai Press Club. Ka pau tau whawhanga ake whanua mo o nimo lelei. Pau tonu ke tau utu lelei. Whewhe alaha ka pau tau whawhanga ake whanua ai hala mo Covid. Ea hono o hono ola. Ke whanua. Ka kutui koe whoi mea lalahi pe ua kia te au koe moto ane te whewhia pito pe ke whahatau tari whehu. Ai mahu inga koe ai freedom of information to gain public trust in the government and the services of government. And I want to share my experience about public trust. I mean, from my experience, I'd like to hear Ryan's view on this. Perhaps Your Excellency, the Ambassador. Although Rachel is still new, but I'm sure you'll have a view. Please feel free. In the process of working for government, even from the bank side, there was a lot of trust by development partners in government. And my own view is that's because the donors were always proactive in seeking the information they need from government. And government, of course, because donors provide strong assistance, is equally proactive to respond to what the donors need. And as a result, as you have heard, government benefits immensely from unproportional assistance to Tonga, not only through development projects, but even to the extent of the trust donors, development partners provide to government in cash in the form of budget support, transfer directly the funds to government to spend at government's own discretion And then through the normal procedures of government, the financial management and the fiduciary of government financial management, trusted by the donor, will report back to development partners. So that is my view of the engagement of government with the development partners, highly proactive. When we come to the public and the media, my view is it's a little different. Perhaps I leave it to the media to tell, that we can discuss. But I listen to media that there's a lot of lack of trust or very little trust in the work of government. And the question is how proactive. But I really think, like any other form of good government, the engagement of the media with the government should be rules-based, should be based on key principles. And when I had a quick look at the government's freedom of information, my own view, it was not bad. But I wanted to hear from the club how and where that has not delivered better for the engagement between the government and the trust in this country. So, Madam Chair, perhaps I could stop there, and I'm very happy to take on questions, rules-based questions. And mind you, I have a definitive portfolio in government. Thank you.
Koi peke minisa ke mea pe me he te pile koe ni imuapa ko wha whaatue ni a Kalaf Moala, Tonga's veteran journalist, to facilitate the talanoa or the discussion that we're going to have. A koe whainga maalia koe ni. We also have Dr. Gioa, who's also an expert in the economy. So we've got some really great minds in the room. So I'm going to hand it over now to Kalaf Moala to facilitate the discussion. Malo.
Malo bito ba go kore beke hu whanga mua e ngai whakatapu ko osa no whai kai ata ke whai e tau session going. We go Q&A, and the Q&A specifically means that anything you always wanted to ask and was afraid to ask, you can ask it now, and the minister is here to answer it. He's obligated to, otherwise he won't be served lunch. And he has, of course, invited us to do so. So I want to encourage you, not only from the media, but anyone that's here, to please participate in asking the questions and whatever questions you need to ask. However, I need to, first of all, make a response to the Minister on the Freedom of Information Act. At the time when Tonga decided to facilitate or to launch this act, there was only one country in the Pacific Islands that had an FOI or FIO. And that country was the Cook Islands. New Zealand and Australia had the Freedom of Information Act. And so I remember distinctly back in 2011 how there was a number of us in media that wanted to ensure that we have this act, because it will kind of guarantee that government will respond to the kind of questions that we ask. I need to say that since the launching of this act, the finalizing of it, that we seem to have had greater difficulty in getting information out of government than before the act. And I can say this personally because since probably since 2019, 2020, I have had several letters written asking questions of different ministers and different ministries, and never even got the courtesy for a response. Even a response as much as to say, sorry, we cannot respond to those questions. So I think let me ask the first question and then we can just open it up. Mr. Minister, why is it difficult often in government to have policies that are stated publicly, to have even legislations like we've had with the Freedom of Information Act, and yet we never see a positive outcome that comes with it? This is a great difficulty that we as journalists in this country have, trying to get an interview with people in the ministry, trying to get our questions answered, feeling that there is already a Freedom of Information Act that the government has an obligation to respond to. And your comments on the fact that there could be difficult information or information that may not be so positive that have come out of media, I think it's because there has been a very much a lack of government responses to the questions that we ask. So I ask you, please help us out here with this first question. How do we improve the situation? How do we get government to be more responsive? Because instead of answering our questions, we normally have government officials, including the Prime Minister, that will take out a program on TBC or 87.5 and provide answers to questions that we never asked. And so please help us out. If again, please field this first question and then we'll just have others that will follow through.
Thank you, Kalafi, as convener of this session. My understanding, very new back to government, but as civil servants, it is our duty to serve the public. And therefore, if the requested information, because the type of information government has, there are those that categorize on those that are openly available and can be, which are, you know, whether it's the portal of the ministry or publication or published. And then there are exemptions. I think the language they use is presumptive disclosure. And for the right reason. It's premature to openly share those information because they are subject to confidentiality, subject to decisions making that are yet to be formed, or subject to, I mean, the obvious court proceedings or those that have obvious restrictions. But if the delay and the non-response, basic information that should be readily disclosed, then perhaps I could ascribe that as lack of capacity, if not negligence on the part of government. But depending on the specific issue raised, as you have requested, the information requested, if they fall under the category of presumptive disclosure, then obviously that cannot be shared by government. And information as such, for example, if there are certain issues that government requires some expert view first to form its decisions, then perhaps it will benefit from an internal consideration within government. Because what you don't want is, whilst government is trying to find what is the best and most relevant solution to this, the same has been discussed openly, very well if by experts, but what you see anecdotally eventuate in this country, that a matter of highly technical importance is discussed by less technical views, and then you end up with a non-technical formatted solution that is like what they say when a Hapai lady came to Nuku'alofa to catch the bus to Kolowai, and then he got on the bus to the eastern side of Rabaha. He ended up in the wrong place and the wrong destination. But perhaps that's a quick response.
Thank you. Okay, the floor is open now for questions. Lala? Yeah. Maybe a matter of protocol, if you just say who you are, your name, and what media or what department or ministry you are involved with.
If it will help, we could take 3 questions and then we answer.
Hi, my name is Lala from 88.6 FM. The question that, since we're here for economy of the country, definitely should go in hand with the private sector. The first question I have is, would there be any support private sector in a matter in which Samoa and Fiji are pro-private sector development in a sustainable manner to grow the economy? Oh, and just secondly, while I've got the microphone, I've spoken to a lot of businesses that is struggling right now with staffing, with being able to hire staff. And the main excuse of them not being able to hire staff or keep staff is because of the RSE or the tori or seasonal work that's happening in New Zealand and Australia. Is there any work that's been done to government to protect these businesses? Because if we are talking economy, then definitely should be something to look at.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Lala. On the questions on supporting for the private sector for a sustainable economy, I mean, there are quite a number of initiatives by Fiji to support the private sector and equally Samoa. But I beg to differ. Tonga is much different. Tonga is better. As you know, both Fiji is under certain difficulties because of the prevalence of cases in the country. So I'd prefer to leave Fiji aside. Samoa, they've had cases in quarantine, and they've also had some other external factors, such as the recent political government change. But to make the point, the private sector in Tonga is rather small, and predominantly small, medium enterprises. And also, we are now proceeding with a survey to get a firm whole detail on the informal sector, which through our work, we expect it's quite significant. And as part of the budget, government to date have spent 36 million dispersed in cash to support businesses. And that included cash grant to help the cash flow of businesses. In addition to that, which relate to your second question, two phases of wage subsidy. The first phase for eligible employees was 560 paanga per employee, and the second phase was 1,000 paanga per employee. And they were designed to support businesses that to consider the continuity of the employment of staff and to reduce the risk of reducing or stopping hiring employees. But the point to make, government is focusing on two streams of support. Firstly, to improve the environment for business. For example, this week we are launching the Trade Week, and that is to put a focus of the country on the importance of building the capacity of businesses to sell and buy in the country. And behind the scene, government is looking to streamline, where the constraints to trading agents are reduced, and the cost in terms of cost, the cost is reduced so that the what is paid for by the consumption for consumers are reduced. And just for example, as announced earlier, the ministry is exempting all license fees for a month, and change in business names. All new license, change of license that you do from 24th up to the 24th of September is exempted. So it's seamless just to go and get it for the businesses. But just to add on there is an obvious mismatch in our the skill set that we train here in Tonga and the need of the businesses. So there's a lot of work. If you see government provides 1,200 paanga to each and every TVET student in the country, and that is to help the institution develop the right skills to meet the requirements of the private sector. In addition to that, there's a lot of emphasis on the quality. As you have heard, government is also approved today the bill to establish the National University for Tonga. And these are all examples of government commitments to build the quality of our the capability and qualifications of our people to meet the needs of the businesses. We also recognize that, for example, the seasonal employment, where we take up to 4,000 or 5,000 of our populace annually, both to Australia and New Zealand. And this obviously creates a vacuum in the country. It's not just the businesses. What we learn from communities, I think more obvious in the outer islands. When you take 10 capable men out of the community who does most of their hard work, the community feels it. These are the guys who provides for the livelihood of the community. And equally important, the same people, when the more capable, the more experienced workers of the country goes to New Zealand, it leaves a gap in the country. So we are working now. We have registered an unemployment registry in the ministry to also try to match the new vacancies that are available. But we realize that there's still a mismatch in the skill set that we have as unemployed and the skill required by the businesses. So I just want to acknowledge that that is a prevailing gap, and our ministry and also the Ministry of Education, who are also in charge of the training and higher education beyond, is working to address that. But equally, for example, a key stakeholder is the church education system, who also work o mea hene pātere ko ia pure ako e katolika, ua whakme ngā hi ako whakateknika re whakaensinia e siasi. Ka koe, but these are all areas that needs addressed.
Honourable Minister, you mentioned the budget. With the new budget, who are the winners and the losers with this new budget?
One of the biggest winners is the private sector. When you look at the government support before, a lot of the support were mainly a business environment, legislation, policies in place. But in the new budget, the last and the current budget, as mentioned, what has been transferred to the private sector is 36 million cash transferred. This is not new, but in other circumstances internationally, it's unprecedented time for Tonga, and government, where it has the capacity, has provided. This is not normal for government to provide such a large amount, but the private sector was one of the winners of the budget. Health. There was an increased budget commitment to health. So our, lacking for the better word, our health safeguard of our health, we should feel safer because, for example, in this country we don't have a case. but at the risk of a longer lockdown of our populace overseas. So it's quite a contentious decision. But the first and foremost for government is the safety of the people in the kingdom first, and to address those of our populace, our brothers and sisters who are overseas. Government has also provided an extended support to ensure that they are equally in the respective locations where they exist, equally safe. In addition to that, just off the top of my head, social sectors were also winners. Our elderlies, our special needs also got an increase in their allowance so that they get a little bit more, so they had more money in their pocket. Obviously, by doing so, government is the loser, so it has less money. And if you hear from the budget, we are projecting a 40 million paanga deficit. And to do that, in order to do all these winners, and most households who depend on getting private, personal goods from their relatives overseas, they're also winners. All the duties applied normally in these household goods are exempted. So what would have normally been applied duty is exempted. So they, although we also receive in government some concerns from private sector, that what is exempted as household goods is also put on the market to sell. That is left for our border control to provide a reasonable allowance for household use in order to give some protection for the business the business which falls. There are others, short to say, everyone else win, government is losing. And wanted to highlight, fortunately, as I mentioned before, government has successfully managed a very strong cooperation with development partners, and development partners has supported government significantly to be able to do more than what it would have normally been able to do. So many thanks to our high table, those that are here and those that are not here.
Malo ignistar katal peke u fraugat mo he Tonga ko benefit ke kakai u fanongo mai hel ngalu pe mo ngahile tio mo television ne ko ulaki pe kalaf mala fa mo le ko tawataina kon ko e ka fai ngongo ko tu u tau futa wataina ka kato ki tau tolu ka ko tawataina ko ma ko he ka social media na toi holo Facebook ignistar ko tu ka kakai to ton ke to kai mo holao ke WhatsApp ki na tolu kon oinga ma tolu kon go ai ka fai ngongo fa professional e fonwani o ma toka e au pito ke ota na mau ia ha ngongo o hata kono wa pe ko tokoni ko ekepe ai tokoni ho ministries ani ko mo hanga fra ata mai ngai business e lo tonga ko fainga ta ia fra manla hi covid ta hiva menga impact ko hoko itongani ko lave ipe ko nga ko lave la ta henia ko industries ko taki mamata ka oku faka fainga mali e ko ke oku lockdown e fonua e ko ke hatak mamata e ha ko me pe ta honga tu oaki ko o atu e ta fonga ki faita ko tu oaki pe fra mamalai fo he media fra social e tu oaki fonua ka ya pe ha ko nga ya ko ava e ka wa fonua ko mai ka kai o fe kumi mai ke ki foi para taisi ko ni ko tongani ko ki lave pe kan ki he ko viti tahi wa mo lolo tonga e taulere i he fe amokaki fa tolu miliona deficit 43 minus 43 million lolo tonga ko ia e panga i wa no miliona ke transfer ke tokoni aki angai u sector tautaha ko ia na feasibility severe ai pure anga ke whakatatau i moe pa anga ko wheta wha aki o ku e sia lahi taha i he tau whanua koe ni. Tau tāpune tau tole tala noa ki he taki mamata e wha maha taimi koe ni. He kone ngā koe long term process ia. Ka tau siofi ange ai short term process ki whai maha taimi nou koe ni hiri hatoa whakanatula. Koe hae mea tō ngā uwhai. O ku tau tō ai mea kai bawe taha ki he kai mahina taha mahina ua mana tolu ka mata ki tau kai. Koe pangai ua tolu miliona koe ni, ko hai e tufa ki ai, na tufa whakalai one. Te osat pēu te alot pe sirinia, o hupea ki he ukau taha, lolo tonga, o kia kau taha wakapuna, na e ihe tonga, kua tamate ia kau ngā ku tau whakalere tau tole preanga. Pako kore mua ki wahe mai mua mo tokoni mai ki he, ke lau miliona koe nuku amanaki ke monu ia e whanua, malopita.
Kata ki soane ki koe lau miliona kona ke unga ke ai koe lau miliona fe. Ai ua ono kona ke ai me.
Ua ono miliona koe ni. Na pe tokoni ke he sektoa tautaha.
Koe ka pako unga ke he mea kona ai atu. Koe tolono miliona koe ko ostufai.
Kia haifa mole whituna.
Ki he ngahi businessi. Aia kena kamata mai ni he kamata pe koe COVID-19. Aia ku ia ko ngahi tau whapaanga koe oski sune e wanoa. Pea mai ko ngā mai ki sune koe ne ua whe ua taha. Aia ko ku uhinga koe ngahi mea ne ko osi alu ia.
Whawasi pe ingmista.
Kau ki hokat peke mea kona na ke ai mai.
Malo.
Aia koe Facebooka mea i pe ko se ai whake lao ki ai. Kau ko tauloto tatau ko tō peo skamata ke whai mo ngā ue he taimin. Pea au saton ke ngā ue, ka koe mea ko mahinu ka teo pea mihi ngahi hoa ngā ue ko he pureanga. O nau kei whakakakato hono nifo e lao ka nau lava ke nau hanga o whakahoko e lao koe ni. Ai au kia ngahi mea whakateknolosia pea moe. Ai koe ngahi mea koe o ku ihe tau talanoa koe ni o mi kakato. Pea koe ne kakato pe koe aku malava rewa ke nau hanga o enforce. Koe ngahi business koe ni koe ulaki takai he tau ko osi na ke toka mai ke tak mamata. Koe ulaki takai he tau ko osi na e toka ngā makehe ke tak mamata. Pena e pe moe tufa makehe na oawe ke ngahi tak mamata he na ulaki. Koe mea ke mahuinga he taim koe na e kamata e ngahi mea koe ni na e whakafuofua e a umai ke he tisema koe o e tau ni ku osi foki e ku whakafuofua pe. Ku o foki e ai whefolau aki ki he anga mahe ni. Ko tui koe whakafuafua koe nei whai koe ai koe laini no ti sema sanuari o e tau ni. Koe au mago he taimini ko tui tau mahino pe pau ke whakaloloa i. Ai fo i. Ai a koe uhunga koe fo i whakafuafua koe ia na e pau pe ke whai ngau e lahi me tak mamata ke nau mau he nau foki mai ki ha taimi koe e ai foki ai mea ke no molo. Ai pau ke toi ririu e ai fo i ngau e koe ning. Koe taimi koe na mau kamata ai pure anga he kamata anga e tau ni ai ne tokoni ki he ngahi kautaha. Na e kai ke toi nofo ia ki he tak mamata. Ai na e tuuaki rewa mea ko ni ko hai pe ha business he whonua o kune ongo e kue me ngahi whaka makatuunga pe koe criteria ki ai. Pea na e o mai rewa ke nau whaitohi mai ki ai. Pea na e osko no apply pea ko ki nau tau rewa na e monu ia na e ostukuanga etu pea mo ngahi tokonia ko ia. Hange pe koe tokanga ne nai na mo tokanga makehe. Ai koe tau pehe pe koe kau license businessi. Koe kau businessi a koe laiseni. Koe ki whakamatala pe ke mahino e koe whakapilitania koe business within walls. O kia hano ngai whakangatangata o elfo i laiseni. Pea koe elewa na mo tokanga makehe na tokanga makehe ko tau kainga koe unau ngahi pe ki koloa whakatau. Kau kai ki aha nau laiseni. Ai koe whakapilitania ke mahino koe business without walls. Ai koe hange koe kakai whewhine pet. Te ngahe te ki ngatu, ngahe te ki whala. Pe koe tokotaha ku lawa atu ki tōkanga ai ne ki ngoue ha o whakatau he vehala me ngahi mo ngahi whea koe ni o kumausi o ku ai ko nao tōreo kai ke laisen na mau lawa toko ni iai ai ko nei pangani mange au ke he tokotaha na e lawa toko ni iai ke mimi koe toko fitu afe ka koe tau mua pe ia ke oe tuu e nau whangi ngā oe o kwhai ka ke hoko atu pe hono toko ni i koe hau koe ai o la soane hau koe o la koe meme koe vai ua ia pe se te whawha ai wage subsidy pe koe toko ni koe ke wahe kau ngā oe pe se te whawhitu rewa ai grants ke cash flow koe ngahi business pe kau aku me tak mamata Ai au kai ko accommodation be o kau hene catering ko entertainment ko whewholauaki, kau e whewholauaki wakapuna ki ai. Ko ai be ke mahino hange ko o whehui ko na koe ki he lulutai. Ko te oku ki ongo sensitivi ka koe tahane ngahi mea maho inga koe sea. Ai maho inga ke tau maue mo oni, pea ave mo oni. He ko hi pau ke mahino apito. Ko te mo mea ko mea nai hokone alu ke tu e kau taha. Ai whenonga aki whakalota whonua. Pea koe makatuu ngai nai huatai pure anga, he namo mea ipio ke whema upe ke hoko ate ai whanonga wakapuna. Koe uhi ngā pei. Pea ke hano ngahi whaunga. Ka koe hano to'o, ko wangoe te sio ke hano to'o hala. Pea mo to'o ke mahino. Ka ku whema upe ku hange pe koe whakatala noa ane nai. Ka pate tau whawhanga pe whanua mo oni, pe te tau unua i bege mo oni ulelei ange mo moni ulahi ange. Kakapau pe moe mahu inga koe ke whengao e ake whetawhea ke ngai whakamatala mo oni. Ko uhi ke mahu inga pe e tau whakaukau mo e tau whakamau, he ngahi mea mo oni. Malo.
Malo pito i Minister.
We have time for just one more question. Yeah, Tima?
Ki whaasi mua ga. Ke whakakato pe whamoemore. Kai ko te whakawhekikia koe whakamalo pe. Karafi?
Okay.
Ek Minister whamoemore pe ko whamoemore he wala ki ta whakone wapuna ka koe isi utala noa lolo ia ke tau debate ai. Ka ko whamoemore pena ko we i au e mea utotonu umolotonga longo ai i whare area. Ko ki whotu pe koe me whakalanga tala noa. He na e toro fola e tamatui hau e whonua. Whelawe i mo e pisinisi koni. Pako kore whamoemore ke tau whakatatafe, tau tolu tāpune tolu e ke tau toki debate ai a pungpongi. Ka hoko atu mua tau ngā ue, ka koe ka pehe ko o atu ha mea hala. Ko o atu ai totonu mo e mooni, o tau wholofola, mo e mau e kakai. Malo.
So ana tau whanongo peke he wholofola ni a whio, ne kei ke asea mea koe nā. Nei ai ko ngā pehe, ka ne kei ke hange ko o whakarea.
Okay, malo abito. Let's have it two more questions, okay? Tima, first one, and Joe from the back.
Okay, thank you, Kalafi, and thank you, Honorable Minister. Katakibe, I'm not from a media outlet or a ministry, I'm just here as Tima. I understand there are policy initiatives that your ministry is looking at that will encourage private sector development, considering the environment at the moment. And I know you probably can't share a lot of it, but oku factor in things like you mentioned before, ease of doing business, and helping the informal sector move more towards being formal, and seriously looking at the requirements of each sector and how it impacts an individual or a couple of people trying to set up a formal business. And I'll give you a quick, very clear example. I tried to help a friend of mine a couple of months ago set up a service, register for a service license, business license. Paperwork was fairly easy. Your staff was very helpful, but then coming to before you actually get a certificate or your license, they ask for an inspection of your place of business. And I went back to my friend and she said, I work out of my bedroom. Who's coming to inspect? So it's on hold at the moment. Factor in things like that, and I'd love to hear as much info as you can give us on the policy initiatives that you're looking at. But I will send you a detailed intervention.
Yeah, thank you, Tima. English or anyway, just to be clear, for the private sector, that is, we do have a stepped-up program to support the private sector. As we speak, we are constructing the next phase of the government assistance to the businesses, and I'm glad the governor is here because free of the instruments, we have asked for some expert advice from the Reserve Bank, who works directly with the commercial banks in how we could provide those instruments. But generally, what we're trying to do, firstly, to help businesses who have difficulties repaying their loans. Because as you see, as COVID is extended and prolonged, the cost of credit to the businesses, their debt will increase. The prospect of business return is not increasing, so to speak. So the risk is increasing for businesses. So we're trying to work out, by advice from the Reserve Bank, 2 or 3 instruments to help. Perhaps reduce the cost to the business. Say, for example, subsidize the interest rate or the increase in interest. And one of the seemingly plausible instruments, guaranteed loans. Aya pe ko hono whakasi e risk ke he toko taha kuno, kapau e whihalaki. Ka kapau e lelei pe mea kotoa pe, then it's a normal loan. Ka ko winga pe time whengata apa ni, me whakatau mua tau pe he ka business ku lavea i hango ngai tak mamata. Lavea na toko ke toi hoko mai tak mamata. Kapau na vie mafuri ka ta whaake taha, ko hunga ke, obviously that will cost the business. And they need some additional capital ke whaia ke ngāwe ko ia. Aia ku kau ia he ngahi. Koe tokon koe ke employees, we are anticipating that will continue. I he mahu inga pe ke owasi lavea mauanga ngāwe pe koe mauanga moui e totaha ngāwe ko ia. But in terms of ease of doing business, inspection is rather critical. Ko tui mahoinga pito ke tau whiilonga ki pe, he oku ai fo ke ngahi pisinisi koe kai ke te tala mo oni, e mea kou te tala he te whomu. Pau ke me ngahi pisinisi o whakangatangata. Aia ka koe mea kou mahoinga ke he pureanga, ke paupe ke whai e ki a ahi, ke whakapapau, koe mea kou ke o mai he whomu, oku mo oni. Pau mea ipe he ko wanau ke ngahi pisinisi o tapu. Na koe pila miti mo ha koe ngahi me na ko business pila miti a koe ia tim ko hi ka pau e wakai atu o pau ke taofi ka i time tatau koe mea ko hoko tau fonua kusi lavea ka fai totonu ko hi ko no whakapapau o koe ko ha fai hala ai ko tui pe ka pau e mai fai mahina ko ia ka koe mea ko mangai tai mini ku fai feloto ia he tai min me potu ngawe koe lao lai se ni fok he tai min ton ke hau pe apply ho lai sen business i pe o atu ngau fai ngofua ka he time tatau o kia ngahi laiseni whekau aki, peko ngahi ancillary authority. Hange ko ni ka pau koe wharekai, e whemau kia si moilele, whemau kia e fire safety for the public, mo ngahi mea pehe. Koe taimini pau ke mau ngahi mea kaka tuk whakate laiseni. Koe mau ngau koe taimini ki aike whai ngofua. Hau peko mau ho laiseni, peko e mea ia ai potunga mo ui, pe mo potunga e tamate afi, ke nau toki o ato wakai, mo whakapapau, i o kuke comply. Ka koe mea ko whemau ke o te ke toi lere holo toko taha business ia, o whai e umea koe ni. Ka mau whakapalanisi pe mahalo iai pe ngahi tuku kehe. Iai pe ngahi mea tuku kehe, hange koe ngahi mea oku aluia ke list whakatu tāmaki, hange koe alcohol, hange koe ngahi whakatau anga alcohol, o ngahi mea pehe, ka koe ngahi tuku ke he ia, but normal businesses, mau whenga pe ke popo ke kau businessi, ke ate whenga maari e ko ia. We are also building capacity ke launch ka pau kai ko September, soon after, koe ugui koe a renewed incubation support services me potunga, business incubation. Part of the new programs we'll do there, koe training, advisory, per moe linkage ki he credit scheme ko mo dano ke per moe ko vana ke fai hono tokonia ka ko whakatau mua ka toa mea ko nia ke whakalahi ke whanua. Ko mo trade week, one of the reasons why we remove all the fees ka pau te ke business ka oku mau whemau ke ki iongo u ke whi business mea mai o lai sen he taimin hu ko ki loto ke business we also have the support services to support you so that we can have more people. We are encouraged that from last year, nengo pe COVID, ko e business license ni na kaya uya nofi I Tongan. Na ni mangea tup ko tai mini o over here nofi. Ak mo hiki ak me tau gosi foi license ni fo o e ono ngea o varno. Aya ku whakarota lahi pe, ka koe mau sio koe ki he real sector, pe koe ngahi whika koe ngahi mea ku hau, o ku ki kehe ia, ai pau pe ke mau interpret lei, o ku holo ia. Ai koe whakatata pe koe lahi ngahi container wa o mai ki tonga nea, o mai koe ia ki epeleri, o ku mei pesete tolu fitu, holo ia me tau kosi. O ku tatau pe me lahi lolo kou tau ngau ea ki, holo a bit, ai lolo kou ngā ke whonua, pea mo ngahi whakailonga kehepe. Ai mahino koe ka pahe ke tau whenga ke whakafoki hake ki olunga. E mua mai ne holo, kai mui mai holo ma anga pa anga kakai, pea tau tue ki whainga tā iang. Ka koe uhi ngai koe ki step up ai, ngari lahi pe sawane ma pehe ko tolu miliona, ka usi ia ki he holo koe nu hoko ke ngai businessi. Ka koe tau mua pe hange koe mea na tokan kia tima. Ka koe tui koe mea maho inga he ni, ke tau ke mo ipe ku fai ngawe tokon e pure anga pe taimi he kai ke futon ka e tokon e pite tau whengawe ak maofi ko tiu mea ipe tima mo mea we try to step by step side by side by the chambers of commerce ke mau wongo ipe we can feel the heartbeat of the private sector malo.
We have one more question to go, but there was a question here, Mr. Minister, on the tourism tax incentive. Can you just comment on that briefly?
Malo koe whehui lele nia ka sione moa. O koe ke o mao e whakamui taha ka pau ko ha mea fo'o. Ka pau nea ha mea fo'o tax incentive ki he takmamata. But what I can say, we are now talking, ai au gai investor fo'o e ua, koe taha ai fuoroa pe nau I Tongan, ki he hotele ki fua motu. Ka oku mau ngau e ki he ngahi incentive anga maheni. Ai ako e ngau e ko he taimini ko si secure te me ko pesete e fitu noa e nau investment. Ai ako wawea ke sai au pito. Pea ai ko hau ia ke he waa investment na potu ngau e rather than tourism. E ko hiko e fu investment lahi ka ku katak pe mahole e whia ke wakai nau ke hawhakamui taha he tax incentive ki he tourism. Okay.
We will give the last question to Joe Ramanla. Otherwise, he's not going to serve us lunch.
That is quite right, Kalafi. Minister, the Honourable Minister, before I ask my question, I would just really like to give the principal of Up4O, Father Ugaxi, he needs a very short question about the future of the student and the school of Toma. A very short one before I get my question on board. Remember, God is here.
I suppose it resonates with what Lala shared earlier. But this is the perspective of schools. I'm the chairperson of the Tonga Secondary Schools Principals Association. And there have been reports of students as of last Friday, it closed the payment of exams fees for level 5s and level 6 for public examinations. There have been reports that students were not able to pay up, their parents. What schools normally do, we do cover these costs and run after the parents after. But the number is increasing by the year. I'm speaking on behalf of all the principals. We are all feeling this. Perhaps, maybe, I know perhaps I should have asked the Ministry of Education, but he can voice this, that there are parents out there who are really feeling this COVID-19 era. Thank you.
Go ahead. Yeah.
Mr. Governor, I'd like to bring them to the table, seeing that the Governor of the Reserve Bank is here and the Minister of Trade here. This situation we're in, this coronavirus that we have now, economically, it's affecting the global of the world. But let's take Tonga for a while and just have a good look at what we are here in Tonga. The tourism is the greatest hit all over the world in this global virus. And it's just that tourism in Tonga is not a major player of the country. It was always a second-rated one. So in that word, or in that ethics, I'd like to bring it out and say, really, our currency right now is one of the lowest, and it's keep going down. We live with all our imports from overseas. As the minister indicated, the number of containers are going low, less. Oil, everything is imported less. It's because the currency, Tonga currency, is very, very low. And we are not even a big player in the currency game. We are nothing. I mean, Tonga is not even in the global of currency basket or whatever you call it. But why is it that the majority of our lifespan, homes from rich to poor, they depend on buying this stuff from overseas? And it is just a time for the government to really look and say, hey, we don't need tourism, we don't need to get people to come here, but we need currency to move up so that we can afford to pay what we are eating every evening, the plates, the table, the food on the table. We have to buy with our local currency. Our local currency will soon be worth nothing. It's getting worse and worse. And we are not have to be tied up with US and China and all in the currency thing. We are just a little small player. Isn't it any way the government to look at that? Because it's our life. Bread and butter is life. And if things get worse and worse, remember Samoa. When the time their currency was nothing, toilet paper was better than the currency. So I'm just wondering, and I'm just putting on the table, it's something worth thinking about that makes sense to us as living, because we depend on that. There must be a way. Don't tell me that we're going to go all the way down and keep going down without any. We have enough smart guys in the Reserve Bank and the government, guys like you, Minister, the Governor, all genius. They're genius people, they're smart, they know what to do. You know, there is a way to get this currency back. We used to have a currency that can afford to pay things. We're paying twice as much for New Zealand. And that's our biggest buyer. Even His Majesty mentioned, see the country that we deal with, make it the currency bar to it. US. Come on, guys. Think for 1 minute. We have to live. We don't have to live on your ranking of what the world does now. We have to find our own way. We can't be on a global thing. We got to find a way, and if it's a way to do it, do it. Because we depend on you guys. You are the leader of the futures of this country. If you can't do it, then we might as well take a dive. Thank you very much, Kalafi. Thank you. Thank you for my chance of speaking to you.
Thank you.
Minister and the Governor, thank you.
Yeah.
I think we'll just have a quick response to that with you, and then we'll...
Yeah. Thank you very much. First on the question from Badri. In principle, as you have said, this is of the Ministry of Education, but in principle, government has been providing support to subsidize fees under the COVID circumstances. And with that, Patri, I hope you could take it to the minister responsible for education. But like for the Ministry of Trade and Economic Development, I have no reluctance in exempting fees for the same purpose, but I'll leave the examination fees for the minister responsible. Convener, we also have some, in my view, some brilliant proposals on the currency to the Reserve Bank. And to answer the questions from him, I defer to the governor, who is the doctor, means Mr. Currency, if you like.
Wonderful.
Malo bito huvang ipe Tatafu malo peng Mr. peg so sefo. Kapag te ki kamata Tonga pe hagi tala tata pe. You know, when you walk into church, te ke whiri ki mata pako moko taha ke tangutu ai. He ku ma puni apu te whalotu. O te mingo te ke moko si ai, te ke kore koe ke tā puni mata pā, suffocate te whalelotu ai. So, koe konga koe ke currency, the level where it is meant for everybody. So when you feeling cold at church, ke kore ke tā puni mata pā, suffocate ka toa whalelotu ai. Anyway, if I can come back to currency, yes, I agree. This has been an issue of complaint from the public. Not all of them, because a fair percentage of them actually think where the currency is, because it helps the economy during a troubled time like now. But when you look at the inflation rate, yes, the inflation rate has just picked up, not just because of the currency, it is because of a whole range of issues, including the shipments and all the extra fees coming into the shipments coming to Tonga, delays and all of those. But also oil plays a lot of role there. Now, there are two ways of determining our currency. If we feel we have the power, the demand, the excess demand to leave our currency to the market to determine our currency, that is the best way out. Every prices depends on the demand. So if the demand for Tongan Paanga, if there is an excess demand for the Tongan Paanga, the value of Paanga will go up, become strong. You look at cover. When there is excess demand for cover, the price of cover will skyrocket. But when the excess demand falls up to a point where there's no excess demand for it, the prices you can see now will go down. So the option of setting the exchange rate by the market, we need to strengthen our exports, minimize the demand for imports, but just doing that, the excess demand for Tongan Paanga will go up, and that will strengthen our currency. Unfortunately, there's no such thing. There's no excess demand. There's no big demand for our Tongan currency. If we leave it at the market, the value of currency will fall. Most of the developing countries have experienced this, and this is why they have to fall back to the second option of fixing currency. The Tongan currency was artificially pegged to the British pounds before we have our currency, and then from there to the Australian dollars, artificially back to the Australian dollars. But unfortunately, all the problems in Canberra and in Australia were imported to Tonga through that single pack to the Australian dollars. In other words, there was no such thing as Tongan Paanga. That is a form of dollarization, Australian dollarization of our currency. Every inflation rate in Australia and problems with the monetary policies are set in Canberra, that will come straight to Tonga. Now, the variation of that pack is to, instead of packing to one currency, pack it to a basket of currency where the problems that are come directly from the one currency that we used to pack to is moderated by sharing the problems with a basket of currency. Now, to set that basket weight, it depends on our trade with our trading partners. The American dollars, the American economy plays a lot of role in our currency because if you look at the flows of ins and outs of exchange of foreign exchange from America to Tonga, compared to New Zealand in and out from New Zealand, compared to Australia in and out, the overall weight of this is dominated by the American dollars. So whatever happens to the American dollars, they, in the basket, they dictate a whole lot of things that happens to our currency. So if you hear the news that the American dollars is strengthened against the New Zealand dollars or against the Australian dollars, the Tongan paanga will go with the American dollars. Because in the basket, the US dollars dictates, they have a big share in the basket. So when you see unfortunately, most of us import from New Zealand, but the share of New Zealand in our basket is less than 20%. So if you see the New Zealand dollars strengthen, the Tongan dollars will or should strengthen proportionately. But unfortunately, the New Zealand dollar is strengthened relative to the American dollars. So the weakening of the American dollars in that relationship will dictate where the Tonga paanga will go. So we will go with the worsening US dollars. So because there's no way of us setting the rate, these technical relationships set. And the weight is based on the proportions, the shares of our trade and our overseas exchange transactions with the rest of the world. We can't just decide to set it artificially. No, there has to be a relationship. Okay, if by pressure the Reserve Bank is forced to revalue the exchange rate by 5%, as Joe says, that is easy to be done, but by common sense, and the cost is very, 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 very big. To revalue the paanga by 5%, that will cost Tonga $34 million. In other words, when the World Bank, New Zealand, Australia grant $34 million to help COVID-19, if we revalue the paanga, that will offset that drain. So we have to think again, do we really need to revalue the paanga? Fiji did intervene during the coup by devaluing the paanga, devaluing the Fiji currency. That exercise was meant to make the Fiji dollar more cheaper to help the economy. Revaluing the paanga won't help the economy, it will kill the economy. Well, overnight, $34 million will go from our foreign reserves, offset whatever these donors are helping Tonga. But because of our fixed relationship to the US dollars and to the New Zealand dollars and the Australian dollars, that relationship will stay. So $34 million go today, but tomorrow it will go back to normal. So we'll have to continue revaluing. But let me say, you see that Take Tonga High School, TCC, cover idol. You see, a lot of people there were, please, I would love your currency. You know, when the window at the church caused you to look for a cardigan, please shift. Because that window was meant for everybody in the church. Not only those who import from New Zealand, not only those who import from Australia, it's the whole economy that matters. Malawit.
Yeah. Malawabito, thank you, Governor, for those comments. And thank you so much, Minister, for
lastly from
sharing.
Me, if I could very quickly.
Yes, okay.
I mean, firstly, thank you very much for the opportunity. Please take it from me on behalf of the ministry, by extension to government, that clear and timely and appropriate disclosure of information is our commitment from government. On the basis, as we have discussed, it will build trust in government by the public and all the stakeholders, and it will also help and inform the decision-making process of government, and just to encourage where you have the capacity to improve the proactiveness of the engagement of the press club, with government. If I may, I mean, government have a lot of capacity issues, but we'll bid for a stronger and more professional press. I have seen in the press school leavers who interpret the budget quite awkwardly, but they need, I remember when we introduced the freedom of information policy, we also introduced a diploma with ATI in Auckland to also deliver at community, and that was designed to benefit media here in the country. And we also know that there exists a media for the wrong reason. For example, you have, I mean, I shouldn't say it, but you have individuals who are professionally are not suitable. For example, they have been convicted or they've been dismissed for doing the wrong thing, but then they take up a media role just to make a case. But the point to make, we support, and where we have government have capacity to help the media council do that, we are very much, you can count at least on my support. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Let's give a clap to the... Thank you, MC. Over to you.
Big malo apito to the facilitator, Galaf Muala, veteran journalist, and whom all the young journalists are aspiring to be like and follow in the footsteps. But in particular, Honourable Minister, thank you for your time today to attend the press club, the first press club for 2021, and hopefully you will set a precedence for the rest of the government ministers who we will be inviting to talk on certain topics. And we also like to acknowledge Dr. Kioa for his contribution to today's discussions and all the questions that were asked. I get the privilege of just having a plug-in as the MC. Minister, just for your awareness, we just finished doing a community-based rollout all over Tongatapu, the two newest, Hapai, Ewa, and Vava'u. We did a community-based research with the woman, and the one key recommendation from the woman with regards to the assistance, the COVID-19 funding assistance that was 250 and then it went up to 500, is that please don't forget or leave behind the woman from the outer lying islands, because often they get the information and the funding is ended or the application forms are not available and they have to catch boats from the outer lying islands into the main island of the outer island, and often that costs money to put petrol in the boats. So their plea is to consider alternative ways of communicating with them so that they are aware of the funding that is available, because these are the women o nau lalanga koe tau ngahi tau wala, nau koka tau ngahi ngatu, and they are in the most remote areas of Tonga. But the access to our wider markets that we have access to is sometimes limited just because of simple miscommunication. So willing to work with you more, Minister, and your good ministry in terms of increasing that visibility and information and connecting the women to the COVID-19 impact funding that is available to them. Without further ado, that's what I got. I volunteered to be MC because I knew I could plug in something in the end. So I'm going to ask Lala, can you please deliver our vote of thanks, the President of the Media Association of Tonga, Lala.
I had a whole list of VIPs to thank, but I've only got two, so lucky me. Big thank you going out to the newly High Commissioner of Australia, Her Excellency Rachel Moore. I'm not sure if you've been to any functions, but I'll take the privilege now to welcome you to the Kingdom of Tonga. I hope you enjoy it, and we look forward to seeing more of you. Big thank you going out to the representative of the New Zealand High Commissioner, the First Secretary, Mr. Ryan Brown, and big malo to the Minister of Trade, Honourable Tatafu Moeaki. We asked you to come today and answer some questions, And we were lucky enough to get the governor of the Reserve Bank, Dr. Kioa, and even lucky enough to get him to answer some of the questions as well. So big thank you, Moe malo ke minister, pe Moe governor, he lava mai ahoni, mea mai ahoni. And also big thank you going out to Daina Kami from the PACMES. PACMES has always supported the Media Association of Tonga. Not just in training that we have. I know we just finished a budget training and a fact-finding training and many other trainings that you've provided for the Media Association of Tonga and all media journalists here. And big thank you to the Australian government for always stepping in to facilitate and to pay for our training and also for today. But lastly, again, big thank you to the Minister of Trade, Honourable Tatafu Moeaki, and also, like Offa said, let's hope that you set the trend for many other government ministers and different government personnel that we might be asking to facilitate us. Malo abito.
Malo lala. It's always great to have a young leader leading the associations in Tonga. Hopefully we'll see something like that with our new parliament in November, some fresh blood. Anyway, I'm going to ask Betty Blake, ka takpe wha Moimoi Betty e talahui, ko le atpeke ke send us off home safely today and bless our lunch. And just a reminder, straight after this, can we all have a group photo with our guest of honour, the Honourable Minister, and our two diplomats. Malo Betty. To say the prayer, Betty, please.
Ke tau lotu, tamai o tua, koen ko mau wa usia, ai polokalama ne ui ki mautol ki ai. O mautuk ai whakawhitai mo whakamalo ke tataki le rei ai awhiona. O mau malawa ai tamai ke whakamatala mo eke angai whiui, mo whanongo ke hangahi tari, ke ngai whihui na whakaamo ak mau toluni ke mau whanongo ki ai. Pea koia kua mau ausia, pea whakamalo ke whakaata o e minister, ke ne mea mai he hoatani o whakahoko ai whakaamo ai kalapu koini. Pea peheke e kovana, pea mok mau tol kotoa ai kau whakafofonga ku mau iheni. Mau kore peta mai ke hoko atu ai ngahi whakailo mea kia ki mautolu ko e kakai o e whanua. Ke mauto ilo lahiange ke ngahi tataki o kwhai miho maupureanga. Ko ia ai whakamalo ki he kalap koe ni ke nau fotu ai polo kalamarele pea ke awhio ai pe awhio na e Palestini ka pehe ke kaunga awe kotkoto ape. Mau kore eki ke tāpekina ai mea tokoni ko teu ke to'o ha mau inasi, ke whakamalohi ha mau sino, ke mau ke lawa i pe o whakahoko ai whinangalo e awhiona. Mau kore a mea kotoa pe i he wafa o Jesu Christo, ko alo ka ko mau eiki. Amen.
Yes. Can we have the photo up here or down here? Up here? Down here? Yeah, can you join us?